I want to welcome everybody to our first 4A'S webinar to actually be about the 4A'S and how to get the most out of your membership. My name's Molly Rosen, and I'm the new head of agency relations and membership here at the 4A'S. And we wanted to do this webinar today because all too often we hear from our members that they don't actually know the full breadth of services and resources available to them. And they're often surprised when they find out all the different ways that we can partner with them to help drive their business, whether that's our training programs, our consultations with our agency management services group, our resources from a research capabilities, or our benefits and insurance programs. There's always something new. And we want to make sure that all of our members understand how to get the most out of their membership with the 4A'S. So to that end, I'm joined today with some of our members who are going to share how they work with the 4A'S to drive their business. To introduce them, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Bob Linden, who heads up our training and education group. Bob?
Thank you, Molly. Good afternoon from New York, where we are streaming live to you. My name is Bob Linden, and I head up training activities at the 4A'S. You told us that one of your priorities was training. We heard you. In calendar year 2013, 4A'S conducted 37 webinars. In 2014, we have or will have conducted 44 webinars, and I expect that number to increase in 2015. This compares to only 9 webinars conducted in 2010. Since 2013, 4A'S conducted 93 seminars covering such diverse topics as writing for SEO, project management, pitch management for new business, how to present remotely, and so on. But a subject we have never addressed deals with how to get the most out of 4A'S. Be prepared to hear yourself saying, "I didn't know that." This is the very first live video webinar produced by the 4A'S. Our goal today is to inform, advise, and educate 4A'S members of the many services available to them. Over the next hour, you will be hearing from 5 4A'S members in our studio, and we thank Ogilvy for use of the studio, and via webcam, one of our members from Nashville, who will tell you how their membership added to the success of their businesses. Since this is not the usual go-to webinar that we run, where you can type in your questions and I can see them on my laptop, you'll need to type in your questions via text using the number 917-873-3299, and I believe that number is shown on the screen. If and only if we have time near the end, I'll handle the Q&A section. So let's introduce our panel. First, here in the studio is Kathleen Brookbanks, Chief Operating Officer, OMD New York. We welcome Diana Bald, Executive Vice President and Director of Marketing and Business Development from the agency Assembly, located in New York. From the home of the Kansas City Royals, we welcome Sam Mears, President and CEO, Mears Advertising. We're also delighted to have with us here today my colleague, Laura Bartlett, Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer. Sally Mars currently serves as Senior Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer, McCann World Group, New York. Welcome, Sally. Carrie Hatch is CEO of Washington, D.C. member MDB Communications. Last but certainly not least, via webcam, direct from Music City, also known as Nashville, David Bohan, Chairman, Bohan Advertising. My thanks to each of you for coming here today for our first live streaming webinar about 4A'S. I'm sure this webinar will be repeated many times going forward. Over the next hour, we will barely scratch the surface of all of the services available to the members. To do the interviewing, my colleague and 4A'S Chief Marketing Officer and former editor of Edweek, Allison Fahey. Allison, over to you.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we have a lot of ground to cover today, so we're going to dive right in, and we're going to first start with Sam. Sam, we talked earlier about your agency being in a really interesting time of transition right now,
Right.
and how you're relying significantly on our management services group. Can you talk a little bit about how they're working with you on succession planning?
Sure. We started the succession planning thinking probably a year or so ago, Allison, and one of the first things I did was reach out to Tom Finneran at the 4A'S and just say, well, what should we be thinking about? How should we be thinking about this? We've been approached this year by 3 different private equity firms saying, would we be interested in selling? And so it got a little bit more intense. And I've always wanted to think about how could I sell it to, internally, but you can't ignore the fact that people are asking externally. So Finneran sent me a few different documents and brochures and PDFs and had many conversations. And I think probably the most interesting one was when he and I were in New York one time earlier in August, and he said, you're an entrepreneur, right, Sam? I'm like, yeah. He goes, you make a terrible employee. And I thought, that's probably true. So now it's down to, all right, well, how do we think about the valuation of the company? And the 4A'S is an amazing resource for those types of questions because they've seen it. I don't have any idea where I would go if it were not for the 4A'S to get that type of information.
Well, I would suspect you'd have to bring in maybe some sort of consultant
Right.
for, a hefty price tag.
Do you think that that's the way you would have had to go?
I'm sure it is, and there are plenty of attorneys and consultants out there who do this, but they're not vetted. We don't know their track record, and so you have to rely on just our experience, and that's a huge value of the 4A'S. And I don't think, over the years, and we've been a member for 21 years, I don't think we think about the value of certain aspects of the 4A'S until we need it. And even when we started this process, it took me a few weeks to say, I should just ask Finneran about this. And that comes from being engaged fully with the 4A'S, and you get back out of it what you put into it. And so you just got to know to ask the question.
We talked a little bit about that, about you get what you put into it, and,
Right.
and you felt that, and we're not going to send you an extra invoice, but you did say that you feel like you got more out of it than what your dues were.
Right.
But then you also have friends who say, how do you get so much out of the 4A'S? It seems like you get more than I get, even though that everything is available to them.
Right.
What do you tell them?
To get more involved and to really stop and think about it. I think sometimes we become insular, and Carrie Hatch and I are both in the Gold Forum. And that helps too because we get to sit around with our peers and talk about, well, what are you considering and what challenges are you having? And we just had a forum meeting in Kansas City this last week. And of all the agencies that were there, all but one was talking about succession planning in one way or another. It's like, well, how do we do this? Well, it's great to have that forum, but it's also great to have the 4A'S backing that up. And Harley Griffiths, who heads our forum, it's a tremendous resource that we have that we take advantage of as often as we can.
Great, great. So going to Carrie, because what I like about your story is that you were a long-time holdout, and now you refer to yourself as the poster child. Why were you holding out in terms of joining as a member?
I think initially when I learned about the 4A'S, I thought about what they could offer, but I was more focused on what it would cost. And the price tag, at the time did not seem insignificant. I don't think I had a full understanding of the value, not just a list of services, but people that can help as a facilitator, help me run my business. And I held out for, almost nearly a decade. And now Harley calls me in as the closer. I am now the advocate for the 4A'S because we get so much out of it, from the research to the Gold Forum that Sam mentioned, to just even the data on financial management, and then the inspiration that I get from other people in the 4A'S.
Something that we had talked about was connections and networking, and we've helped facilitate some new partnerships for you. Could you speak to that at all?
Well, there have been a number of them, but you might be referring to some of the legal connections that you've been kind enough to make on behalf of MDB. Some years ago, we were able to meet Rick Kernett of Frankfurt Kernett, and only recently have we had the need with an IP issue that came up. Actually, it was one of those moments where, and I think as leaders, many of us can relate to this, it was an OMG moment where I was in a studio session for a large recording contract that we had, and had a real tough feeling in my stomach about something, and I immediately jumped on the horn, and I got right through to the law firm and said, we're in session right now. Are we doing the right thing, or is there exposure to this? And they, on the spot, Candace Kirsch spoke up and saved me, basically. So that one episode was worth it. And there's a million of those incidents that I can share.
So what was the tipping point? Did you have a friend who was a member who said, jump on in? What was the final moment where you said, okay, I've held out long enough, I'm going all in?
Some time ago, Hal Shoup, who was down in the Washington office, had shared just this much data about financial management. Because I come from the creative side, I was an art director. So running a business wasn't top on my list of attributes. And I thought, this isn't something I can't continue without. I must have it, and I must take the leap, and I must believe that it's going to be worth it, and it is.
Okay, good. So now we'd like to go to David. You know, the advocacy that we do in DC might not get the most coverage, and it might not be the sexiest of topics, but what we do down there is protects the health and well-being of the agency community at large and our membership in, specifically. David is a member of our Government Relations Committee, and David, you had a situation in your home state specifically about the ad tax deductibility that could have been financially disastrous. Could you talk to us a little bit about the 4A'S role and how we helped you beat that back?
Well, we had an interpretation, it wasn't a law, but it was an interpretation by the Tennessee Department of Revenue that because of some change in laws concerning the broadcast equipment, that it became manufacturing equipment, and therefore the product of that equipment was subject to state sales tax. So during a routine sales tax audit, our agency was assessed a fine to pay 9.25% sales tax on all the broadcast advertising we had done in the state of Tennessee for 3 years prior. So we immediately called the 4A'S. They mobilized a coalition not only of advertising agency members, but broadcasters, publishers, and others to come together and really get this situation explained to both the elected and the appointed government officials in Tennessee, and we were able to solve that problem. So the 4A'S is great at forming coalitions. We don't fight battles alone and from the Washington office. We are always shoulder to shoulder with our clients and with our other industry advocates to come together to solve problems on behalf of the advertising agency community. It's a great staff, and really that support that we get is immeasurable, and most agencies don't even think about that as a benefit of being members of the 4A'S.
David, what would that have meant to your agency finances?
If that 3-year assessment had gone back, we would have probably owed an additional $500,000 in state sales tax, and that would have potentially put us out of business because no client was going to pay that retroactively. And so basically any income that we would have had from media would have been just gone.
Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about our research department, which is a frequently used service, and perhaps membership knows the most about that group. But let's talk to Diana a little bit about, in your role as business development, exactly what services you get out of the research department, and how you describe them as a part of your agency.
Well, first of all, I mean, when you called me, I had to take a step back because you're like an extension of our team. Sometimes I forget that you're not part of us, because you're the very first step that we go to throughout the customer funnel. So whether it's when we're talking to somebody for the first time, or we get an RFI or an RFP, or we're getting ready for a pitch, we come to you. And we ask you for research, and we ask you for everything. We ask you for industry research, research on the company. You give us key decision makers. You help us understand the customer journey. And then, and my favorite thing that you've done for me is the SWOT analysis. So you've given us your perspective on the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, and we put our own together, but it's nice to have that counter check with what you do,
Right.
and to see, are we on the same track? Are they picking up the same thing that we are?
And how do you know about the research services that we offer? Is that information that you inherited at your agency? Is that something you sussed out for yourself? Did you pick up the phone? How can other people get that information? It's just picking up a phone, right?
Yeah, we actually send you an email. We just communicate with you directly by email, but we inherited that from the agency, and it's just become a practice that we do all the time.
And if you didn't have the services of our research department, what would that mean for you internally? Would that mean that you would have to hire those resources?
Yeah, it would mean that we would have to put in extra hours. We'd have to, put in longer days, and we already work pretty tough, and or have other people do it. I think it saves us about half a person per project.
Okay, that seems like it's worth the dues. I just want to get back to Carrie for a second on the new business because I know that you use the research department a lot as well, and that you believe that it's helped you get into some pitches and even get to late stage of pitches that maybe you didn't have the wherewithal to begin with.
So early on, after we joined the 4A'S in 2000, we had an opportunity to pitch the National Tuna Council. And I'll be honest with you, we had no industry or category experience whatsoever. But we were intrigued. We had an opportunity. We wanted to chase it. And we did make the short list. I've got to say purely because of the 4A'S, because they made us smart. They made us competitive. They got us into an open door that I wasn't really sure we should even pursue. But in this particular case, the industry information and as much as they could give us in the short amount of time that I gave them put us over the top.
Great, good to hear that. So Sally, let's talk about the partnerships that you have with the 4A'S in your role as diversity officer. If you could let us know how you work with our diversity and inclusion group and Singleton's group, specifically maybe touching on MAPE to begin with.
Right. Well, you have a great group of people who handle diversity and inclusion at the 4A'S. And if people who are watching the webinar are not already involved in some way, please reach out and talk to Singleton Beato and tap into her group. I mean, I think as an industry, we all agree that diversity and inclusion is a priority, and we have to get it right, and we have to do it quickly. And I think our best chance of doing that as an industry is really going through the 4A'S. It's an opportunity for leaders, C-suite level people to get smart about diversity and inclusion in the advertising industry, because it is different in our business than it is in other businesses. And the 4A'S provides toolkits, resource materials, and opportunities to get together with people who are at your same level. I am the chairman of the 4A'S Diversity Steering Committee, and I've had that honor for several years now. And I work with a great group of people from different agencies, large and small. We come together on a regular basis and we talk through problems. We'll have a different subject matter for every meeting. Sometimes we have guest speakers that come in and talk to us about best practices in another industry. Sometimes chief diversity officers on the client side will come and talk to us. And it's a great way also to understand what's going on the client side as well, because they're dealing with their own challenges. Also, through the committee, we've published some materials that agencies can use, some toolkits, some best practices guides on supplier diversity and how to get a diversity initiative going in your agency, and how to tap into some of the pipeline programs, some of which the 4A'S manages and some of which the 4A'S supports through the 4A'S Foundation. So MAPE, as you mentioned, which is the Multicultural Advertising Internship Program, has been around for more than 40 years. And there have been, more than 1,000, maybe even 2,000 students, college students, who have gone through the program and have advanced in their careers in our industry. And it's a great pipeline program. I mean, I may be, prejudiced, but I think it's the best thing that the 4A'S does, because we have people at the ECD level, a guy that's the head of our new business group, all 4A'S MAPE interns, former interns. And they stay involved as alumni, so tapping into the alumni of the program is great too. There are people who are, juniors, but there are also people who are mid-level seniors who are really the best and the brightest. And there's a very strict vetting process for MAPE interns every year, and we have more than 100 every year, and they're in agencies all over the United States. The breadth of the program is amazing. So that's one thing that I think if you're not using the 4A'S in any way, that's one thing that I would do to get the ball rolling with diversity.
If you weren't involved with the 4A'S diversity initiatives and you were not receiving that talent that we were putting through the pipeline, where would you be getting that talent?
Well, I think you'd have to have a number of different employees in your company doing this job and maybe adding to staff. You know, you need people who go out to college campuses, and you have a big travel budget involved in that. And then you have to have relationships with the advertising professors of all of these schools and the career offices of all of these schools, et cetera, et cetera. Also, what the 4A'S does is it makes sure that it gets kids interested in advertising in the first place, which is a challenge, particularly for multicultural students. It goes into high schools. We have 2 specific high schools that are career and technical high schools that the 4A'S has helped start and continues to support. There's a school in Brooklyn and a school in Lower Manhattan that are high schools and teaching 21st century skills and specifically teaching students and getting them excited about a career in our business. So who else would do that? I mean, even if you were, you know, had limitless funds, you couldn't do that as a single agency. You need a governing body to say, let's all come together and support this as an industry, and that's what the 4A'S does best.
So not to lead the witness, but would you agree, like Diana says, that our research department is an extension of her agency? It sounds like you might feel the same way about our diversity group.
Absolutely. I really think that we've made great strides. We still have a long way to go, but I think as an industry we've made great strides in the pursuit of having a more inclusive industry, and I think the 4A'S is really at the forefront.
Great, thank you so much. Kathleen, let's talk a little bit about media and media relations. You're on our board, so you kind of had to be here, but thank you anyway for coming. You're very involved with the Media Leadership Council and some very big media issues the industry is facing right now that the 4A'S has taken up and working with partners on. Can you speak a little bit about the initiatives that you're spearheading as well with us?
Absolutely. I think, you know, in the media space, it's a little bit different for the big media holding companies, one of which I'm a part of, which is it's not so much about coming to the 4A'S so they can do something for our agency, but it is about making sure that we're an active participant in setting standards for the industry. So in media, I think the difference there is that you're looking for common currencies, you're looking for common measurement, because until we can get that across the board, in the agency community, we then need to get that among the media vendors. So it is not something any of us can do on our own. It is not an option. And so right now, the Media Leadership Council is working on a number of initiatives that I think are demonstrative of where our future is going and of critical importance that the industry solve for. We have a council that is looking at measurement in mobile. You know, what should that look like? How do we measure it? What does effectiveness in the mobile space look like? We have a group that's working on cross-platform measurement. So how do we move away from these old nomenclatures of a GRP over here and, you know, something in a different media type? The committee I'm personally very involved with is looking at addressability.
Right.
So what is addressability? How do you define it? Today, you might say it only exists in 1 or 2 media types, but what will it look like in the future? And if addressability is going to happen across media types, how do you put some kind of measurement in place that can happen across all of those media types when we still have different metrics? And how do you get buy-in across all these large agencies that, while we may compete with each other, need common standards in order for what we do for a living, what we bring to our clients to advance to a common goal, really, that advances the industry and can shift those measurements into redefining currencies.
Right.
A really, really critical piece for media.
And to your point, and not to put Omnicom on the spot, but you don't believe that any holding company could tackle these issues on their own and create industry best practices?
No, you can't. There isn't a holding company, because even if we took it on and had the capability, as Omnicom, our competitors could end up having different points of view. And the minute that happens, then you can't have a common currency with the media that we're dependent on.
Right.
So no one can take it on
Right.
their own. It
Okay.
really could only happen through the 4A's.
Very good. So Laura, my colleague, I would like for you to speak a little bit about our benefits program, capital B, not all the benefits of membership. But I think that not everybody really understands the number of people that we insure in the industry and the programs that we do offer, and the many holding companies who outsource that to us. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Just as some of our members have been talking about our services being an extension of what really happens in their agencies, we do have a group. It's actually a separate group in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it's called 4A'S Benefits. And it's a company that provides retirement plan services and various kinds of insurances for our agencies. And, you know, you might think that that's maybe most useful to smaller agencies who are independent and need help in startup because, I mean, who wants to talk about insurance anyway? I mean, it's not a very sexy topic, but certainly all businesses need to be involved in risk management, and they need to understand how to best protect themselves. So we cover not only small and medium-sized agencies, but also our workers' comp program, which is very big. We insure employees in 4 of the 5 holding companies, and in total for 600 agencies, 600 member agencies. And the numbers there are huge, and we've been doing this for over 30 years, so we've gotten pretty good at it. And we insure 127,000 individuals in 600 agencies, and that equates to 8.9 that's a billion in payroll. So that's a really big number. And as you might imagine, that gives us quite a bit of clout. We are a captive insurance company, and we happen to service an industry that we know well, our own, and it's not, we're not building buildings or having hammers and nails and those sorts of things. So we have pretty good history, and what that allows us to do is return part of the premium cost, the policy cost, to our members at across the year or at the end of the year in terms of a dividend. So this year, our dividend was $10.6 million back to our individual agencies, and that represents over 42% or about 42% of the policy cost. And that's been happening for the last 10 years. Our dividends have been in the 40 to 45% range. So it's a really beneficial program and often covers some costs.
I was going to say, so for a good number of agencies that may be thinking, you know, I can't afford these dues at the moment, I have to assume that some of those dividend paybacks offset the cost of membership.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And of course, insurance markets vary across states, and we can't insure in a few states in the union because of state regs. But we believe we offer very good value in terms of the dividend and also in terms of the service. We have very experienced people who only deal with the advertising agency business, and they're very helpful. In fact, in many instances, will be the very first person or the first entity to hear about an unfortunate accident and be able to start at the moment getting involved. But it goes beyond workers' comp. We also have other business insurances. For those members who own their agencies and who are principals, of course, it's important to cover yourselves in terms of having the right kinds of insurance, D&O and various liability insurances, including cyber-tech, which has, of course, come to the fore. And we won't talk about patent trolls because we won't, but along with many other kinds of insurance, the cyber-tech insurance is important. Also, we cover health insurance and group life and accident insurance as well. And the largest single cost after payroll, actual payroll cost, is normally health insurances. And it's also a very important benefit to employees, as we all know, and we all probably participate in understanding the importance of it. So we do offer a program through a captive insurance, another captive insurance program. And we are not insurance brokers, but we do get very involved in designing programs that are very specific to the demographics of our industry. And we believe they're also very cost effective, and we provide service. And last, we also manage retirement funds, 401ks, but even before there were 401ks, we go back 50 years in the retirement plan business. So again, we're highly experienced, and we believe we give the best service in the industry, and we look at the true cost of the programs, and we're totally transparent so that your employees, member employees, have this service through the 4A'S and can access their accounts online and see exactly what it's costing them and what the results are.
Very good. Thank you, Laura.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about training. I know that most of you have used the training services. Sam, the Executive Leadership Program,
Right.
can you speak to it?
Yeah, totally. I went through it probably in the early 90s when it was, I think it was in California. And I've sent one of my current staff to executive leadership training, and I have another one coming in 2 weeks to New York. The program is really rather amazing if you've not taken it, if you've not thought about it. It's managing an agency in Perth, Australia for a 3-year period in about 5 days, and it can best be described as agency
Virtually.
Virtually.
We don't send
yes.
people there.
That would be quite the trip.
And really worth it.
And really quite worth it. Yes, then it's really a value. But it's 3 or 4 days of what could only be described as agency boot camp. And I don't remember exactly how many decisions are made, but it's computer simulation, and it's like 300 decisions in 3 days. It's exhausting, and it's the best training to help young people understand what it means to run an agency. And it's relatively timeless also. I think it's been updated somewhat, but it's the issues you face in senior management, they're the issues you face, from workers' comp to diversity, everything we've talked about here today. And that's all covered in the ELP.
Right, very good. I want to talk a little bit about the forums, because I do hear from membership that forum engagement is one of those things. When they are engaged with a forum, they do feel like they're getting a lot out of that. I think you'd refer to your gold forum as therapy session, business therapy.
Business therapy for CEOs.
What goes on in those forum meetings?
A large part of it is validation. You share similar experiences, but that's okay. There's a certain portion of that where you can learn from other people, whether it's a contract dispute or an HR issue. And in my case, since I'm the sole shareholder, not being alone
Right,
is great to hear
right.
from other CEOs and how they've creatively solved a problem that maybe you're coming upon, or just even being able to pick up the phone or create an email within our Gold Forum to survey, how do you handle things, different leave policies, maternity leave, how do you handle different issues on collections perhaps, or
Right.
other issues?
Right. It seems, I've sat in on only a couple so far, but it seems that they're much more candid than most agency roundtable discussions that are even held in private. Is that true, and why would that be?
There is a trust that forms over a number of years, but even so, when we have new members join, you immediately recognize the authenticity of everything that is said in that room. You also know that it's not going anywhere else. So there is a bond between the CEOs that are part of a forum, and we do help each other out. Even when you're doing a search for a creative director or chief creative officer, we do help each other out on many, many issues.
Very good. And David, back to you out there. I know that you had engagement with forums as well, and I think that you had mentioned the value that you get out of forums, and also the Management Practitioners Forum, a transformation. Can you speak to that, please?
Yes, the Management Practitioners Forum is the day before the start of the Transformation Conference, and it is, I described it at one time as like a forum meeting on steroids. You might have 200, 300 people in the room talking about issues that affect agencies that, are primarily the independent agency members of the 4A'S that are there talking about their problems, sharing their experience, and how they solve problems in a very practical matter. Between the two forum meetings that I attend annually and the Management Practitioners Forum, if those are the only 3 times that I got involved in the 4A'S, it'd be more than worth the dues payment. But if you take the other advantages for training that the 4A'S offers through the regional councils, that is really a benefit to your agency staff, and the forums and this Management Practitioners Forums gives your senior staff the opportunity to hear stories from other people that are being successful and have solved problems that are common to our industry.
Very good. I think that you also talked about some other benchmark materials that you get from the Management Services Group. I understand you use the agency cost report to have a whole
Yes.
staff meeting around that. Can you tell me how
We
you
do.
utilize that material?
Every year in January, we give a recap of our previous year's performance to the staff about how we did in terms of our gross income production and go into detail about how our expenses compare to our peer agencies in the 4A'S. And I think it really gives the staff a perspective of our agency and how we are doing by comparison to other agencies that are members of the 4A'S. In addition, we use the salary survey extensively to benchmark the pay scales for each position we have in the agency. So we look at agencies all over the country in our gross income size range, and then agencies of all sizes in the Southeast region to compare how we're doing on a base salary level for account executives, art directors, whatever position it is, and look at that survey information just to make sure that we are being competitive in what we're paying, because we all know the hyperbole that might exist between peers in our industry about what you make. So this is real solid information. It gives, and over time, this builds a tremendous amount of trust for the staff, for the management of the agency, that we're treating them fairly.
And you feel it actually is a morale builder?
Oh, definitely, because when you go into that January staff meeting and people that are there for the first time, and you're pretty much giving them a full detailed financial report on how the previous year turned out, I've had many people come up and say, well, aren't you scared to give me this information because where it might end up? And I said, no, we trust you. It's just, we're all in this together as an agency, and we're going to build a better agency by having people being more transparent as managers and also having more trust from our employees.
And Kara, you're nodding, so you use these benchmark reports as well. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I do. The other thing that's really wonderful about the 4A'S, we use the flip side of that to demonstrate the expenses, because not everybody who's a creative person or someone who's in production or is in the studio or an account executive fully understands how agencies make their money and how they can impact the bottom line positively or negatively. And when you demonstrate, what it costs in terms of office supplies over year, and
Right.
that could have gone into the bonus pool. And when you benchmark it against other agencies of your own size, it right sizes the credibility of what I'm sharing and what other agencies are doing. And it does win over friends and allies in managing costs and expenses.
Very good. Kathleen, what would you say to media agencies who think that the 4A'S is more focused on integrated agencies, small independent agencies, or creative agencies?
Well, I would say certainly in the media space that the 4A'S, it's not about the size of the agencies. It is about the progression of our industry that they're focused on. And I feel that in everything that I'm involved with with the media leadership team. So it is not about size, it is about our industry and where we're going as an industry that they're focused on.
Why would you think that some media agencies would have that perception and they may be holdouts like Carrie was for so many years?
Well, I think first of all, when you are big, you think you have the resources, and if you're not really in touch with the kind of work they're doing and understanding that it's not about whether it's another agency's point of view versus your point of view, but that it's about progressing our industry. If you're really not understanding what we're doing, it's all too easy to think that you want to go it alone and that it's about somehow compromising an individual point of view.
Right.
And it's not.
And Sam, the other services that from besides the succession planning that you're working on, the vetting of the private equity firms that have approached you, you're a high-end user of some of the reports that come out of that group as well, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting when you start connecting the dots between the salary survey, the cost survey, and a lot of the other surveys that just come out throughout the year. If you participate, you get to share. And I think that's a really key point. And as owners and senior leaders, you look at that and you say, well, how can we connect the dots? And sometimes, again, you pick up the phone and call the 4A'S and ask the question of, have you guys thought about this? And actually, Tom Finneran, when we were talking this summer, and I finally called back and said, it's now been 3 different private equity companies. He said, send me their names. I want to start tracking this. And so now the 4A'S is tracking who is doing this, and you're starting to see articles in Ad Age and Ad Week coming out about the middle market, of acquisitions taking place in the middle market, which is totally different than the big 5, holding companies. So there's all these reports help paint a picture of management that there's just no other way we would get it without the 4A'S.
Diana, agencies that are members who are not using the research services currently, what advice would you give them?
Well, one thing I didn't mention to you was the accounts and review.
Okay.
I check out the accounts and review at least once or twice a year, and it's really helpful for biz dev people to see what accounts have gone in review, who's managed those accounts. Are they creative or media? If they're creative, media might be around the corner. And with regard to folks that are not taking advantage, I think just a quick look on the website every quarter, I discover something new, without a doubt, or just a phone call to the 4A'S.
Fair enough. David, you have an interesting theory as to why certain members may not be fully engaged, or why certain members have not gone from interested to becoming membership. Kathleen mentioned when you're a large agency, you may feel like you have all the answers. You have a little bit of a similar theory?
Well, that's for more of the independent agencies. As founders, sometimes we have to believe we have all the answers because in the understanding that the collegiality of the 4A'S membership, and not only through the forum program, but through other programs that, I've had the opportunity to visit agencies, large and small, all over the country, and those agencies are very willing to share and have conversations with you about the problems that they face. And the admission that you really need to can go out and find those answers. And because when I founded my agency that's celebrating its 25th anniversary this year, I had worked at an agency that was not very well run. So I knew I needed to find answers, and I went to the 4A'S and applied for membership before we could qualify, and had a service to new agencies program at that time. So for 3 years, until we got our financials in shape to be qualified for membership, we took advantage of every opportunity and every conference that we could go to learn about how to run an advertising agency. And I give a lot of the credit to our being named Ad Age Southeast Agency of the Year this year to the 4A'S. I really do.
Well, you're welcome.
Well, thank you.
congratulations.
Thank you all.
Okay. Molly, let's talk a little bit about membership and how to get involved. You talk to these folks, and obviously they're here. We stack the deck. They're here for a reason. They're happy, engaged members. And in the 6 months I've been here, and even a little bit less for you, I think that all the membership conversations that we have, the more engaged a member is, the more value they get, obviously. But I have spoken to a couple of members who think that access is limited within an agency to a certain number of people. Can you address that myth?
I can, and nothing could be further from the truth. So the great thing about membership is the agency holds the membership, which means everybody from the receptionist all the way up to the CEO can access any of our resources, whether they do it through our online resources, whether they pick up the phone and call a department head. Anybody has access to all of the resources at the 4A'S.
And the forums, which are always a hot topic when we talk to
definitely.
members. Some people think that there's this big mystery around the forums, and it's like this sort of selection committee involved, and
Oh,
to be a
it's a
forum
huge
member, you have to
mystery.
apply.
It's calling me.
It's calling you.
Mystery
Okay.
solved.
So do we have her number floating on the bottom somewhere?
212-850-0753. No, but seriously.
You're gonna be sorry.
I know. Well, my voicemail is going to be full soon. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, it really is as simple as picking up the phone and either calling me or one of the other representatives. We want to get as many people involved in these programs as possible because of the benefits that you've heard from Carrie and from Sam and David. And, we will always work very hard to make sure that we're getting as many people who want into the program.
And where there's a forum, there's a committee.
And where there's a forum, there's a committee or a
So the
council
difference
or a-
would be.
So forums are meant for our small to mid-sized agencies from various geographical regions that come together to discuss issues that all CEOs and principals face, et cetera, as we've talked already. Our committees are really more discipline specific. So, for example, I head up the strategy committee. There's one for project management, one for large agency finance and small agency finance. So pretty much for anything that you would want to get involved with, there's a committee dedicated to that. And again, it is as simple as raising your hand and saying that you want to be a part of it.
Fair enough. And Sally, so the diversity issues on behalf of the industry, obviously, you had spoken to. I want to get a little bit more specific about how McCann has benefited from those efforts and those initiatives. You mentioned that you have a significant number of MAPE interns that have come through and still come through. Your ECD is a former MAPer, as we call them?
That's right, Van
Okay.
Graves.
So in terms of talent and other initiatives that we've worked with McCann, what would you say was the benefit of those?
Well, as the Chief Diversity Officer of McCann World Group, it's not like I've got a big team of people working on this. It's me and one other colleague, Siobhan Hodges. And what's great about being part of the committee is you can bring different things that are going on in your agency or issues that you're grappling with and find out how other people solve those problems. And everybody's got the same issues at every single agency when dealing with diversity. So, but it's nice to be able to go to a group of people who are as passionate about solving those problems as you are and, find ways together that you can come up with ideas. And nothing's impossible when you have the power of the 4A'S behind you. You have all these big agencies and small agencies and all of this energy and the support from the leadership of the 4A'S. Nancy herself is the Chief Diversity Officer of the 4A'S. And I think that made a significant impact on my decision to get so involved in the 4A'S Diversity Steering Committee because she took such an active role in solving these issues herself.
And that theme of coalition building, which David first started speaking about, that we do in DC, the same on the diversity front. And Kathleen, can you speak to a little bit, because those big media issues are big and they cover many different industries in some cases, and there's different associations along the way.
There are.
So
There are a
we're
lot of
involved with
us-
coalition building on the media issues as well, right?
Yes, very much so. I mean, for example, we have been working closely with the Media Ratings Council because we are looking at defining measurement in digital. And we're doing that across 5 areas. They've completed 3 out of the 5, and the idea was that we wanted to have alignment from all of the agencies part of 4A'S with the Media Research Council before that work came out, so that we could be supportive of the work when it finally came out as an industry. We're very involved right now working with the ANA on the highly controversial subject of programmatic and trying to keep the lines of communication open between the agency community and our clients. So we're very actively involved with that right now.
Fair enough. So we're coming up on the 10-minute mark. We're going to be opening up to questions soon. But before we do, we hope that there's questions from the viewing audience. But just in this table alone, before we move on, what advice would you give a member agency who has said to you, you've already said, get involved more, pick up a phone. But for anybody else who, an agency member who may not be as engaged with the committees and the forums and maybe not feeling they're getting the most out of it, what would be your advice? Diana?
I would follow you on the 4A, on Twitter. I'd follow you on Twitter because, you give us the relevant stuff to look it up there. And
Okay. And Kathleen?
I would pick the one area that you haven't been involved with and pick up the phone, call the person who leads that. If it's the media space, it's Bill Tucker, who's doing an amazing job. And I think in a 20-minute phone call, you'd be amazed at how much is going on in any one of these categories.
Would you be surprised if I told you that it's become clear recently, which is why we're doing this webinar, that there's a good percentage of membership that aren't aware of all these benefits?
Yeah.
That surprises you?
Yeah.
No.
It doesn't
No.
surprise you?
No, I think the 4A'S does a good job of communicating, but I think people have a hard time understanding the relevance. And if I were going to say do one thing, it's pick up the phone and call an active 4A'S member and just say, why do you pay the dues? What do you get out of it?
Right.
That's
Well,
the
you're all
easiest.
leaving the phone number for the audience, right?
Yes.
So they can call
I'll
you,
leave- I'll leave
because you're our
Bob's,
best
right.
salesman. That's right, that's right. Carrie, advice for a current member who maybe not that active or a prospect on the fence?
I would go to the website because that's the menu that kind of gives you an idea of different areas that might be most relevant to your particular situation. I would say do it because it makes you more competitive. And that's the bottom line for me anyways. It makes us smarter, it makes my team smarter, it sets a standard, and it's also, as a small to medium-sized independent agency, it's a credential in a pitch. And one other plug I want to get in here because I use this so frequently is contracts and contract negotiations and the discipline that it takes to push back on spec creative and ownership and things like that. All those things that you deal with as the head of an agency or new business development are within the 4A'S.
And
It's a
within,
big
I'm
help.
sorry to interrupt. And within contract negotiations, compensation negotiations with clients.
Absolutely, absolutely. Very valuable.
I had a friend recently whose agency is not a member, who called up. Her largest client is trying to renegotiate her. Fairly hysterical. Give me your login for the website, because she needed the members only content behind there. So we'll make them become a member, and then she'll
That
get the
happens
stuff.
to me all the time. People call and they want the free stuff.
There's a black market
No, I
for the
love you
free-
to death, but join.
Right,
And
exactly.
Sally, some words of advice?
Well, the way I got involved in the 4A'S and the Diversity Steering Committee is I got to the point in my career where I wanted to do something and give back a little bit. And so I went to our former chairman, Gene Kummel, who had been very involved in the 4A'S and other organizations. And I said, Gene, you do so many things to help the industry. Is there something that I could do? Can you point me in a direction? And he handed me this book, and he said, here are all the committees of the 4A'S. And it was a rather thick book. And he said, find something that interests you, and I'll get you on that committee. So I flipped through the 500 or so different committees, and I found this Diversity Steering Committee, and I said, that's something that I want to get involved in. And here it is 10 or 12 years later, and, it's been a constant in my career journey.
Great, glad to hear. So before we bring Bob back up with hopefully questions from the audience, I wanted to thank you all for sharing your stories. Is there any area that you don't feel we covered well enough? I'm sure Bob will say training. Yes, Bob. Okay, come up here and do your training pitch.
No training pitch, but as I suspected, lots and lots of comments.
Great.
We had no idea. We had no idea the scope of services. But let's go to the questions. And we're getting a lot of questions, which we will never get to, but let me read some of the questions.
Okay.
Let's see. And this is a misperception. Does being a 4A'S member require my agency to be a union signatory and hire union performers?
No.
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 Yeah, but a lot of agencies, I know, in unison now. No, a lot of agencies think that.
We could have a whole webinar dispelling
Yes.
the myths, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Uh,
not today.
David and Sam, you touched upon this about the forum program, but someone is asking, can you elaborate on the format and the topics covered?
Oh, that's
Sam,
good.
you just shared ours. Why don't you do it?
Yeah, I just did one in
Yeah.
Kansas City. So the format was very simple. We visited two agencies, VML and Barclay, and we also visited Sporting Kansas City, the soccer team in Kansas City. But then we also spent 2 half days talking about burning issues and agency updates, and that's where the real intensity and the learning comes. David, anything to add to that?
Well,
no, I think
what were
that-
the burning issues? I mean, you have to tell us what you talked about. I mean, the topics, but
Well,
not
those are
exactly.
confidential, I'd say.
Not the
No,
burning
the-
issues.
the-
No, they're not.
But but ours, a lot of them dealt with staffing, with diversity, with succession planning, with profit, with billing practices, with product development, intellectual property development. Those were some of the topics of this last week's.
That's a lot of ground to cover. David, did you want to add to the forum experience?
I think it is the depth of those discussions that Sam talked about the issues. In our forum, each member submits in advance 5 areas of concern that or questions that they have, and it's a responsibility of the other forum members to be prepared to provide advice and counsel from their own experience. And that type of sharing just doesn't happen. I mean, a lot of people in the agency world belong to networks to get that. The forum experience kind of negates the need to be involved in an agency network, from my opinion.
I'm sure we'll be hearing from those agency network people.
I'm
Thank
sure
you,
you will.
David. I appreciate
Allison,
that.
I just want to add
Yes.
that from the 4A's perspective, part of the format is the forums are really forums so that there are not competitors sitting in
Right.
the group. And I think it's really important for others to understand that. It's built in such a way that there are not direct competitors together in the same room.
Well, that's how they get such a candid conversation,
Candor,
right? By really sharing what's up with them.
Right.
Bob, another question from the audience,
Another
please.
question from the audience.
Or doing a
How
game
have
show.
you used the 4A'S to prospect for new business?
Diana.
Well, the accounts and review is excellent tool for that, because if you see that account came up for review this year, then they're not a good prospect for new business because they just selected an agency. So keeping tabs on the accounts review, for multiple years is a great way to do that.
Also on the website, there are many press releases about new business, just one. So besides the accounts and review, there's just the constant feed of news releases about the account movement. So that might help as well, yeah?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
good.
didn't know that.
Well, now you do. See? We could have had another whole conversation. Bob,
Quick question. What types of agencies are eligible for membership?
I think there's a common misperception that only creative agencies or maybe media agencies are eligible, and the fact is pretty much any type of agency is eligible. I think the way we like to talk about it is if you create marketing communications or place marketing communications, you are eligible for membership and a welcome part of the community.
very good.
On an individual level, what's the best way to get involved in our local market via 4A'S? And this is someone writing from a Minneapolis agency.
Well, we have actually a great community out in Minneapolis, so I would say, reach out to the local council is one way to get involved if you are interested in influencing the local market. As we mentioned before, there are the committees, which are a great way to get involved as well, so you can influence a specific sphere of the industry. Or just reach out and call. If you also have a passion project, you know, these are things that we're interested in hearing about too. So I'll give my phone number again at the end, but again.
Molly,
just pick
did
up
you
the
want
phone.
to speak about the reps in the field?
Definitely, so thank you. Good segue. So in addition to myself, there are 4 fabulous reps in the field. Harley Griffith, who represents the Eastern region, Lori Stern in the Central region, Jerry McGee out in California for the Western region, and Greg Walker down in the Southern region. They are tireless workers who are dedicated to the agencies in their regions and are always available for questions or for help.
Thank you, Bob.
And you get the last word.
I get the last one, which I will. Well, first of all, thank you all very, very much. Thank the audience for tuning in. We hope that you understand a little bit more about what we do with the 4A'S and the value of membership. I'm going to give the last few seconds to Molly.
Perfect. So again, thank you to everybody who participated for giving your time and sharing your experiences. I also hope that everybody who is listening today picked up at least a few new tips on how to engage with the 4A'S. Obviously, we can't cover everything here today, so again, I will share that my phone number is 212-850-0753, or you can also reach me at mrosen, M-R-O-S-E-N, at AAAA4As.org. And we hope to hear from you.
With that, thank